Have you ever stopped to think how someone can reach the top of the world and still lose everything in such a fast and devastating way? We're talking about athletes who achieved everything anyone could dream of. Global fame, multi-million-dollar contracts, recognition and respect. People who seem to have the perfect life in the eyes of millions. Idols who inspire generations, seen as examples of discipline, talent, and absolute success. But there is a side of this story that almost no one sees. A side that doesn't appear in highlights, celebrations, or moments of glory. Because while the world is cheering, while stadiums are full and everything looks perfect, there is a reality unfolding behind the scenes. A silent reality built on decisions, pressure, and situations that often go unnoticed. And it is exactly in that invisible space that some of the most shocking stories in sports begin to take shape. And then, suddenly, everything changes. Those same athletes who were once celebrated begin to appear in headlines for completely different reasons. Not for goals, titles, or records, but for investigations, accusations, and trials. And in some cases, they leave the sport not by choice, but escorted by the police. And when that happens, it's not just a career that ends, it's an image that collapses, a legacy that gets questioned, a story that completely changes direction. The top, which once seemed solid, reveals how fragile it truly is. And that raises a question that is hard to ignore. How does someone go from the absolute peak to a prison cell? Were the signs there the whole time, and no one wanted to see them? So make sure to like the video and subscribe, because here we go deep into the most powerful stories in sports. And this one you will remember until the very end. When you look at an athlete at their peak, everything seems perfectly under control. Intense training, strict discipline, structured routines, high-level performance, every detail appears carefully calculated. It feels as if success is an inevitable result of all that effort. And that is exactly what the public believes, but that is only the surface. Outside the stadiums, far from the cameras and applause, there is a much more complex reality. Constant pressure, unrealistic expectations, personal decisions, and an environment that can completely transform someone's life. None of this shows up during the game. Fame changes relationships. People come closer for different reasons, decisions begin to carry greater consequences, and mistakes are no longer small. What once went unnoticed begins to take on much larger proportions. And it is in this environment that many athletes begin to lose control of their own lives, often without even realizing it. Because success in sport does not guarantee stability outside of it. In the end, not everyone who is winning on the field is winning in life. And the most concerning part is that many times no one notices until it is too late. Aaron Hernandez was seen as one of the biggest prospects in the NFL. Playing for the New England Patriots, with undeniable talent and a multi-million-dollar contract, he appeared to be building a solid career alongside some of the biggest names in the sport. On the field, his performance was consistent, physical, fast, and decisive. He was involved in key plays and became an essential part of the team's offense. Everything pointed toward a long career at the top, with the potential to define an era within the league. He was young, had resources, structure, and visibility. But off the field, the reality was different. In June 2013, Hernandez was arrested and charged with the murder of Odin Lloyd, a man he had a personal connection with. The case quickly gained national attention, mainly because of the contrast between an elite athlete and the seriousness of the accusation. The investigation gathered evidence directly linking Hernandez to the crime, including records and material examined during the process. During the trial, details emerged that revealed a side of his life the public had never seen. In 2015, he was sentenced to life in prison. His career ended there abruptly. And what remained was one of the most shocking stories in modern sports, not only because of the crime, but because of the contrast between success and what was happening behind the scenes. The case of Aaron Hernandez went far beyond sports, crossing into a much deeper territory, raising serious discussions about behavior, environment, and mental health within professional athletics. Because it was not just about a crime, it was about understanding how someone with so many resources, support, and structure could reach that point. Many began to look back at his life, analyzing his trajectory, trying to identify warning signs that may have existed before everything happened. Reports about behavior, personal history, and surroundings started being examined more carefully, not as justification, but as an attempt to understand. And that is what makes the story even more unsettling, because some of those signs did not appear suddenly. They were already there but were ignored, minimized, or simply not understood at the time. Success created a kind of protection around him. This raises a difficult but necessary question. How many similar stories are happening right now, while athletes are still at the peak of their careers without anyone realizing what is actually happening behind the scenes? The case changed how many people view elite athletes, showing that talent and success are not enough to guarantee personal stability, and that what remains unseen is often what matters most. Mike Tyson was one of the most dominant fighters the sport of boxing has ever seen, a true phenomenon who redefined aggression, speed, and power inside the ring. His rise was rapid and overwhelming, becoming the youngest heavyweight champion in history and building a reputation based on explosive knockouts and complete control over his opponents. He didn't just win fights, he imposed fear. His presence alone was enough to intimidate before the first punch was even thrown, and during his peak, he was considered nearly unbeatable. Everything around him pointed toward a legendary career, one that would dominate for years. But outside the ring, his life began to shift in a different direction. Fame brought pressure, wealth brought excess, and decisions outside of sport started to affect his trajectory. The balance between success and personal life began to break. In 1992, Tyson was convicted of rape and sentenced to prison, abruptly interrupting what was still a dominant career. The impact was immediate, and his image changed drastically in the eyes of the public. After serving his sentence, he returned to boxing, reclaimed titles, and had significant moments, but he was never quite the same. His story stands out because it is not only about the fall, but about the attempt to rebuild after a collapse that could have ended everything. Ronaldinho Gaúcho built a career defined by pure talent, creativity, and a unique connection with the game, becoming one of the most admired football players in history. A World Cup champion and Ballon d'Or winner, he represented joy and freedom on the field. His style made him different. He didn't just play to win, he played to entertain. And that made him a global icon admired across generations and cultures. That is why, in 2020, when his name appeared in the headlines again, the reaction was immediate and filled with disbelief. Ronaldinho was detained in Paraguay after entering the country with documents considered irregular. The case did not involve violence, but that did not reduce its impact. The shock came from the contrast, because seeing a player of his level in that situation felt almost unreal. He remained in custody until the legal situation was resolved and was later released, but that moment left a lasting mark. It showed that even the greatest names in sports are not immune to mistakes outside the field. Oscar Pistorius was one of the most powerful symbols of overcoming adversity in modern sports, an athlete who broke barriers and proved to the world that physical limitations do not define potential. His story inspired millions across the globe. He was not just competing, he represented hope, resilience, and possibility. His presence alongside Olympic athletes elevated his image even further. But in 2013, everything changed dramatically. Pistorius was accused of killing his girlfriend, Riva Steenkamp, in a case that quickly gained global attention and became one of the most followed trials in sports history. The legal process was complex and extended over time, initially resulting in a conviction for culpable homicide, which was later revised to murder, increasing his sentence. The impact was profound. His image was completely transformed, and what was once a story of inspiration became one of the most controversial narratives in sports, showing how a single event can redefine an entire legacy. Benjamin Mendy was at the peak of his career, competing at the highest level of European football and playing for one of the biggest clubs in the world. His trajectory seemed stable, filled with titles, visibility, and long-term potential. He was part of a highly competitive environment, surrounded by elite players, structure, and global exposure. Everything suggested a continued presence at the top of the sport. But starting in 2021, his career was abruptly interrupted. Mendy faced serious accusations that led to a long and complex legal process, drawing widespread media attention. During this period, he was removed from professional activity, and his career shifted into a completely different context from the one built on the field. Cases like this require careful consideration, as they involve complex legal matters, but they clearly show how factors outside of sport can directly impact an athlete's career in profound ways. When you look at all these stories together, it becomes clear that these are not isolated cases, but part of a pattern that repeats itself in different ways. Talent is present in all of them, success as well, yet something still fails. What connects these stories is not the sport itself, but what happens outside of it. Personal decisions, environment, pressure, and circumstances that often go unnoticed, while everything appears to be working perfectly. There is a common belief that success solves everything, but these stories show the opposite. Success can actually amplify underlying issues that were already there. And perhaps the most important realization is that these factors do not appear suddenly. They build over time, quietly, until they reach a breaking point. And when that moment arrives, there is often no way back. In the end, these stories go far beyond sports. They are not just about victories, achievements, or downfalls. They are about choices, consequences, and the impact of decisions made outside the spotlight. Reaching the top of any sport is incredibly difficult, but these stories show that staying there can be even harder, because it requires more than talent. It requires control, balance, and responsibility. And perhaps that is what separates those who maintain long and stable careers from those who cannot sustain their own success. The question that remains is not only what happened to these athletes, but what could have been different along the way. Because in the end, success may take someone to the top, but how they handle everything around them is what determines how long they stay there.